my next guest, man, this is a man after my own heart. He's a creative artist. He's a writer. He's a filmmaker. He's a musician. He does it all. And his emphasis on projecting and promoting African film is simply amazing. And I know you've seen or heard of The Burial of Kojo. It's a film that he wrote and directed. Before it comes on, take a look at this trailer. Now put your hands together, show some love for the writer director, the man called Blitz. Whoa.
Very, very honored to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure, man. Before we start, your film, my sister was in it, Anima, those of you who know. And she wouldn't stop talking about how professional the set was, how everything was on point, and she kept going and going and going and going. And like, it's funny, but this is the way it should be done, but we don't do it this way.
Absolutely not. There's a Toni Morrison quote, right? And God bless her, she just passed away. It says, I stood on the edge, stood on the border, claimed it as central, and forced the world to come over to me. I live by these words. When I was making The Burial of Kojo, that was in my pocket, that was on my wall. Because the idea that an African can claim an edge and make that central, and the world will have to journey, we're not educated like that. We're taught that the minute you're born, you need to start journeying to them.
Yeah.
From how we speak, how we dress, everything. So for me, this was a huge transition, and I witnessed it throughout my life. When you start claiming your culture as central, the world is curious. They want to know, where did they get this? Can I get some? You understand? And that, for me, has been a huge source of any success I've had.
That's amazing. And that's, to me, the true definition of globalization.
That's it.
It's what do I have that you need to recognize and see, not giving up what I have to get yours.
To get to you.
Wow.
That's it.
Wow.
And I really, if I have one wish for this country, leadership all the way on down to the kid who's in class 1, is this very clear idea of self, where you can see yourself as central, that the world would inevitably have to come to you. And that's my wish and my hope. Amen.
I love it. I love it. You went to study business in Kent?
I studied marketing, of all things, in Kent State University. First of all, one of the whitest institutions you can find in Ohio.
In Ohio?
In Ohio, in the middle of nowhere. But it was probably some of the best education I got. One, because we had a department that was African American studies that I literally lived there. That's actually where I learned most about Africa. You know, because, you know, here, Charlie, you get what you get.
Yeah.
But out there, they focused in on us in a way that also made me understand that I was part of a very wide diaspora of people who are all trying to claim this center, right? So that was very important. But the other thing about Kent State was it also gave me a clear idea that America is very split, you know, and they are very far from finding some kind of middle ground. And when you're a foreigner, you can see it much better than if you've been in it a lot. So, you know, it gave me some very, very critical insights. And of course, studying marketing was very essential. And it was intentional because my parents wanted me to study architecture, because obviously you draw, you're going to do architecture, you know, Ghanaians.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm thankful that they had such high hopes and ambitions for me. But when I realized that, wait a second, our big problem as African people is not necessarily the fact that we are not able to create. Is the challenge is that we find it very difficult to communicate these creations. So everybody in the world, you know, they'll make an iPhone somehow, before you know it, we all have it. The reason is their ability to communicate to us. So when you meet somebody who has never heard of Ghana, who doesn't know who your president is, but you know who their president is, it's all based on an ability to communicate and market. So, and I also knew I was going to be in a perilous career, which was going to be entertainment. And if you cannot communicate in entertainment, nobody's going to take you seriously. Also, you should remember, I mean, now you have Afrobeats has taken over the world. But we're talking early 2000s, even to where Ankara or anything was taboo in the world, because there was no value in it, right? And so a lot of people had to work very hard to communicate. So now it's normalized. You watch a Janet Jackson video and they're all wearing Ankara, and you ask yourself, how did you go from here to there? It's the ability to communicate, right? And I think we're getting better at doing it. If you think of Year of Return, and just to see the influx of people, that's how you communicate. And hopefully now the question is what we do with it when they come. That's another long conversation for another day. Yeah.
We had a friend of yours here. Is your friend Opal?
Oh, yes.
She was our guest 2 weeks ago.
Oh, amazing. I didn't know she was here. Oh, yes, man. That's the Brooklyn Massive. Yes, yeah, we're everywhere. Yeah. But she's another one, I mean, from Black Lives Matter, you know, and she's first generation American, you know, from Nigerian parentage. And so, you know, it also starts to show you something I was saying, that if you look at the rise of Africanness globally, it's a function of our diaspora, some of whom have first generation, some of whom are recent immigrants, because it's almost like you go in and you infiltrate from within, right? So before they know it, we are in every walk of life. There's very few places in America and Europe that you don't find an African very high up. We can name several of them that run major institutions, run major organizations, which so now you start to seed these ideas. And then when our relatives come home, it becomes a dual conversation. So then we can seed them some information from home, and then they take it and they seed information when they come back. So it's been a beautiful rise, and for me, my hope is that we continue and we're more connected, you know. And so Opal comes here and she's able to share her vision, and it seeps to a lot of young Ghanaians, and hopefully young Ghanaians can go out there and it'll seep, you know. So before you know it, we're on to something.
You mentioned something quite interesting, being at Kent.
Yes.
And how it helped enforce some awareness in you of your Africanness.
Yes.
Incidentally, I went through something like that too. It took me going to Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut.
Very white.
Very white.
Yes.
and that's the beginnings of my consciousness, becoming aware.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
So there's something interesting about that transition when you get there, whatever happens. But
look at Kwame Nkrumah. Just a little small example, which is very relatable. You know, him meandering through Lincoln University, and I mean, it is Fela Kuti, same. You know, it's very interesting to say you can't see it until you're out of it.
Yeah.
You know, and I really advise people, even if you cannot physically move. First of all, you can physically move outside of Accra. Let's start there. You know, and then you can see, when you go to the rural areas a bit, you can see much clearly the discord that we've sown. But it's the same. Even if you read a book, you're stepping outside and coming back with a new vision. And so some of us who have had the great privilege, and it is a great privilege, to step not only outside of our cities, our countries, our continents, we have a big picture perspective, which is very difficult to have when you're within. Yes.
You're spot on that. So now I want to get back to being in the States with your business background, studying marketing, but you had a foundation of visual arts, basically.
Yes.
So how did that transition come, you know, with a business background, being in the visual arts, and then getting into music?
Yes.
Because musically, you have done so well too.
Indeed. And I've been blessed. But I have to, even before I can even go there, I have to take you back to my earliest beginnings in music. Did not start in the US. They started right here in Ghana. Most people may even know me as Bazaar. I featured on Deba's song, Deba,
Deba,
That was a major hit. 1% of people know that was me, but that's fine.
I'm finding out today, man.
Yes.
Say so loud, man.
Please.
Deba,
Huge hit. We won a Ghana Music Award. I remember going up on that stage and taking that award because Deba did not show up.
Wow, that was cool. So you've done the Deba gig, and what's you're still doing some music?
I do music, and I mean, now I have several music videos, but one of my favorite is the one I shot right here in Ghana. It's called Make You No Forget.
Let's take a look at this. Make You No Forget.
But I started through the school of Hama, you know, who actually was down in the neighborhood. And that, for me, my earliest beginnings with Hama was a great learning curve for me. First of all, this idea that you can do it yourself. We weren't waiting for anybody to come and do for us. And also, even before that, while I was in SS, seeing what Reggie Rockstone had done with his earliest albums, for me was the first time I'd witnessed somebody taking his Africanness and claiming
Reggie
it as
Rockstone?
global. Reggie, who, I mean, to this day, I say I don't do any interviews on BBC, CNN, whatever. Reggie Rockstone is part of my conversation because he, even though he doesn't get the credit he's really due, he was such a visionary. Without Reggie and hip life, you don't have Azonto, you don't have Afrobeats, you don't have all these things that have taken over the world. Because he, like most of us, meandered his way through America and London and meandered his way back. And he had a grand vision of what if I just, instead of sampling Miles Davis, I sample Fela, you know? And instead of rapping in English, I rapped in Chi, you know? And instead of shooting my videos in New York, I shot in Accra. And that was transformative. And so by the time I left for America, I had already been very clear that this was going to be a journey I was going to be on. Now, how does marketing factor in? Now, the world wasn't ready for any kind of African hip-hop artist, any kind. So I knew that if I was going to do that, then my job was to then learn how to communicate very clearly this Africanness that was also global. So before you knew it, I was on tour. I put together a band that was a 6-piece band. So it was very high lifey. So we had 3 horns, but still very hip hop. And we went from, at this point, we've played over 35 countries. You know, some of the biggest festivals in the world, from WOMAD to, I mean, you name it, to, you know, Central Park. You know, we've played them all, you know. And that, for me, was also a huge lesson. So by the time I was making film, I could stand on this journey of, oh, all you have to do is look within and look at the things you have. And if you're focused on those and you're able to communicate them well, you know, then you stand a chance. And I think the Burial of Kojo is a huge testament to how to grow that.
Wow. Give me some more information on being in music.
Yes.
And how that relates to visuals in film.
Yes.
You know, I'm thinking music is something more very auditory, you know.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
What's the link? How did that become the foundation for you getting into film?
That's a good question. So, you know, film ended up being my visual arts and drawing mixed with all the music that I've made, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what film is. It's your visual with your sound design and your soundtrack and all those things. So by the time I was making a film, but also even on the practical level, I was managing a 6-piece band, touring around the world.
What is the name of the group? Is it
Blitz the Ambassador.
Blitz the Ambassador.
So that's the name of the band. Okay. I was managing, you know, this group traveling the world. So even when it came to simple human resource management, I'd mastered that. When you're performing in Brazil, you're performing in Japan, you have to figure out how to move people, places, on time, all that stuff. So by the time I was making the Burial of Kojo, I mean, I had mastered that art of just being organized. And if I didn't have that, I don't think we would have. The film is so ambitious and the budget was so minuscule that there's no way that could have happened, right? But back to your question about this transition, I mean, I always saw it as a natural progression. If I draw and I've made music, then all I have to do is put them together. And that's kind of how I arrive as a filmmaker. Yes.
The Burial of Kojo, that was the first
feature film.
First feature film.
First feature film. I'd made 2 shorts, which were really just to get my feet wet, but it's my first feature. Yes. Yes. Yes.
We're going to go into a commercial break. When we come back,
yes,
I want to get more into your whole concept of film.
Yes.
Talk about the Burial of Kojo.
Yes.
And then we can talk other stuff. Stick around, we'll be right back.
Indeed.
Folks, we'll be right back.
The KSM Show.
We're back. Blitz the Ambassador. And it's interesting, you know, on our commercial break sometimes, amazing things happen during the commercial break that unfortunately you guys don't get to see. But you should have seen the crew and how their eyes were opening. Oh, so you are the man behind Deba.
I mean, that was a crazy, you know, I'll tell you how it happened. I went to okay, SS3. So I'm trying to write SATs. So my mother says, okay, you can't be in schools. You have to take classes at Mr. Ano in East Legon.
Mr. Ano.
Yes, so everybody
Wow.
knows. Mr. Ano is legendary.
Yes,
I mean,
yes,
if you ever took...
Is that Dr. Ano, by the way?
Hey, doctor.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry. Oh, my bad. My bad. I didn't know this. But Dr. Ano. So because of that, they said, okay, you can come home. And when I came home, my father had traveled. So he left his little stanza. We had this old Nissan stanza in the garage. I said, okay, well, I can start taking it to school small, because my trotro and taxi money wasn't going far. So I remember a guy who I knew, who was going to Presec at the time, told me he's going to see this producer. He didn't tell me it was Hammer. So we show up at Hammer's house. And, you don't know Hammer. I mean, Hammer comes out, no shirt on. Yeah. I won't tell you what he was smoking, but, Anyway, Hammer shows up, and I'm in the car. So this guy doesn't take me in, He leaves me in the car, goes and does his business, talks business with Hammer, because I don't think he wanted me to meet Hammer. Yeah. He just needed the ride. Yeah. So me, I'm in the car. So Hammer comes out, and I say, hey, that's Hammer. So I'm about to drive off, and I say, okay, peace, or something like that. Hammer is like, do you rap? I say, yes. So Hammer comes the other way. He says, rap something for me. So like on the steering wheel, I go, boom, boom, ka, boom, 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 ka. I don't remember what I rapped. However, Hammer is like, what are you doing tonight? I say, oh, well, homework. He says, no, you're coming to pick me. We're going to the studio. Can you believe that was the night we did Debahan?
Really?
On everything. Crazy. You can call Amma and he'll attest. It changed my personal life. It changed my trajectory. I ended up making songs with Hammer.
Because you said peace?
I said, I don't know. But Hammer has a sixth sense. Like another guy that doesn't get near the credit he's due. I mean, now he sells A1 bread and people think he's the A1 bread guy. But Hammer is a genius in terms of being able to identify and see your power and potential. And I used to see him do it with random guys. Just pick them, put them on. Deba was nowhere near the caliber. But Hammer made him. And he made several other, I ended up being KGPM and all these other groups. But he started with Obrafo. So remember how critical that was for our culture. So he just could sense something. So he comes the other way and tells me, rap. And challenge me to, I didn't lose God. Shit. I was like, this is my chance. Boom, I went in. And he's like, challenge? He tells me to come to... Yeah. I went in and he took me to the studio. We recorded Deba. It was a mega hit. Mega hit. So anyway, that's the story. For those of you who didn't know, now you know. Yes. Exclusive for KSM.
Yeah.
That's it.
First time.
There you go. Now you know. There you go.
So we are going to jump back into film now.
Yes.
So because of your music, your visual arts and everything, you believe that was automatically a link to filmmaking. Indeed.
But I'll tell you my ethos behind it, though. Yeah. Look, I don't think that there's any other medium, and some will argue, but I don't think there's any other medium that exists artistically that commands as many senses as cinema does. So it has the ability to build a kind of empathy that, say, literature cannot, or just music, standalone, cannot, or even still photography cannot. So it is a mixture of these elements that makes cinema such a powerful thing. Sometimes so powerful that it can be the detriment of a whole people. If you think about how people are socialized to think about Africa, it's through the cinematic arts. As a destitute place full of war and famine. That's been the image from Hotel Rwanda all the way on down. Because that's the story that's been chosen to be told by Hollywood. And so the inverse is also true. You can use it to humanize in a powerful way that I don't think music standing alone can do, photography standing alone can do, or even literature. Because before you make a film, you got to write. So I'm a literary artist before I even jump into the visual art and to the sonic art. So for me, I always knew that if I was going to be as effective, visual art and music alone, standing alone could not do it. So that was my purpose. And my statement has always been that there is no reason that 1.2 billion people on this continent and another, I don't know, 300 million in the diaspora have such little representation in such a powerful art form. You can name as many American films about every leader in the world that they've ever had, about every historical moment they've ever had. You cannot name a fraction of that for Africans. That means that other people are being socialized. And here's the worst part. We're being socialized to empathize with them. So if something happens in Paris, oh, we're all crying. Something happens in Accra, well, these Africans, it's either they'll do it to themselves anyway. You understand? So I have always known that this is problematic. So I knew that if I'm going to be effective as an artist, and if my role is to inspire and build a world that makes us, or makes our relationship move from asymmetrical, which is how we've been always dealing with the world, where everybody forces on us and we have to accept, and we have no influence on the world. How? 1.2 billion people. If there's 7 billion of us on this planet, that's a nice chunk of people who should have a seat at every table. There should not be any, I don't care what the conversation is. Almost 1/3 should be black and brown. You know? So if you think about even think about the UN and those who have veto power, and the fact that we're never in the space. How? Nobody stops and says, this is crazy. We don't. You know, but again, when you're socialized to feel like you don't matter, and the world moves either way, whether you show up or not, right? And the problem is that we don't show up as ourselves. You know? Please.
Just to pick on that, talking about we don't show up as ourselves.
Yes.
I don't remember which forum I was at. We were talking about African film.
Yes.
And there was a lot about how we don't have African film that shows us as us.
Yes.
You know, because incidentally, majority or a lot of those African filmmakers have been schooled and socialized by the same
systems. Yes.
So they produce the kind of films that would have been produced by that system anyway.
Over there.
So, yeah.
Let me just give you a little example. You guys remember Italia 90? Italia 90, Cameroon, Roger Miller, right? That for me was one of the earliest times of seeing what happens when you show up as yourself. I remember Italia 90, I was 8. We didn't have a TV then, so my father would take me to a friend of his and we went and watch. That was the first time I saw Africans kicking ass globally. They beat Argentina. He was captained by Maradona at the time. They beat, they beat Colombia. They beat all these amazing teams at the time. Right? They were cheated by England. If anybody remembers this, it was incredible. They were cheated. But to see Africans play football as Africans, celebrate goals as Africans, Roger Miller at that corner, dancing. That's the birth of goal celebration. If you think about how people celebrate goals now, that was Cameroon on the world stage, saying we're not going to play like you play. We're not going to celebrate like you celebrate. We're going to show up as ourselves. And because of that, think about back then, how many African players you can count in European leagues. After that 90 World Cup, it was an influx from the Abedi Pelés, the Ponweirs. And I say to myself, if Cameroon never showed up as themselves, you understand? There will be no Asamoah, there will not be any of these things that we deem normal now. Oh, and now it's impossible to even think of a European team without an African star. You can't even think about it. But that was the norm back in the day. It's about showing up as yourself. So when you tell me that, yeah, you've been to film school in this place and USC and NYU and blah, 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 what did you learn? Did you show up as them or did you show up as yourself? And that was our biggest challenge when we were working on The Barrel of Kojo, was how do Africans tell stories? So now we have to go back to think of my grandmother's stories and ask myself, how were those stories? I have to go back to how Nana Mpedu tells stories in his songs, right? I don't even know that song, Insurance. Insurance is about a guy who, he met his friend told him that he made money because a car hits him. And then this guy also thinks that he's going to go stand in the road, get hit by a car and make money. The car hits him, he finds out the guy has no insurance. Insurance, that was what I was listening to as a kid, you know? And it's like, my Dada B friends will never associate with, what they call local, Ejakonimo and all that stuff. That was where I understood storytelling from. Watch By the Fireside, Mame Dokuno and her crew. I used to watch Thursday Theatre. I used to watch a Khan drama, Cantata. Let me tell you something. People don't respect that, but that's how I arrive. And it's important that we raise those things up because that's how you compete with the world. You're not going to compete with the world because you're shooting your films in East Legon. There's no building in East Legon that can compare to Paris. Sorry. You're just a cheap imitation of what they do. You have to ask yourself, who are we? And like I said, I go back to my grandmother's stories, how they felt. They were immersive, not voyeuristic. Europeans are voyeuristic people. It's not a bad thing. That's who they are. They usually don't even know who their neighbor is. That's fine. That's how their world is set up. Now, when you adapt that, then you're wearing borrowed robes that don't fit. And that's who we've become. So now our family units are getting smaller and smaller. People don't know. I'll tell you something crazy. The little girl who plays in my film, genius little girl. You know why she got the role? Simply because she could speak Twi fluently. She lives in East Legon right here. But her parents made sure that with the English, you're going to learn Twi. You know how many kids walked into audition for my film that could not speak Twi, who live in Ghana, could not speak Ga, could not speak any local language? Because their parents are grooming them to send them out to this world that's going to eat them alive and spit them out.
And so pride, oh, my children speak Twi.
Huh? Really? And I used to tell, I told the parents who didn't get the gig, I said, your child just lost over $3,000 US, right? That was going to come to your family for her to show up and shoot a few scenes in a film and probably be like this little girl, first time she's been on a plane was for our premiere in New York City. She landed in Manhattan. We showed the film in Times Square in a sold-out theater of people getting up and applauding for her. That's what you get when your culture matters. When you look, you can be inward gazing and you can say, Charlie, yes, we can learn their English, so what? But what is really going to give us the upper hand? And like I say, same as when I was competing as an artist in the Indian High Commission. I knew that my value was not in their ability to draw things where they're from. My ability was, and my...
How did you know that? Is it just...
You know, I'm fortunate. I grew up, my parents are intellectuals. My mother's a teacher, my father's an attorney. I'm lucky.
Who's your dad?
My dad is Mr. Elvis Bazawule. He worked on the Rwandan Genocide Tribunal. I'm fortunate, you know. But from day one, they put it in us that first of all, look,
mom?
my mother's a teacher, you know, she retired, she used to teach in Kotobabi. You understand? So like, I had that upbringing. We spoke Sisala at home. We spoke Twi. We spoke, you know, and there were books you had to read, you know. And so, you know, I know that I grew up in a unique situation, but I also know that if I do my work well, then I can start to show the value of that, you know. Because as much as my parents were well-traveled, we still listened again to Ejako Onimo, because you had to come back. And knowing that, then that gives you an upper hand in how you're going to compete with the world.
So you were grounded.
Grounded.
Tradition and
Key.
culture.
Key.
Wow.
Key. They used to send me and I'll be alone with my grandmother in Tumu, in the village. I had to go farm. You know how hard it is for a city boy to be in the farm? Charlie, rough. I used to be like, I thought they were punishing me when they go and leave me up north. You know, you have to eat shea nuts and, oh, Charlie, rough. But now, oh my goodness, I appreciate because those stories sitting next to my grandmother, sitting next to my auntie, and you know, in the village, in the mud hut, that's how what I've become now is an amalgamation of these things. So when I'm globally competitive, people think it's because no. It's because of this grounding.
Foundation.
This is it.
Yeah.
This is what makes you competitive globally.
Okay.
Yeah, man.
Have you started thinking about your next film?
So I mean, I'm working now on an episodic series that I'm hoping to get off the ground very soon. Is very, very, you know, it's going to be great. And my goal is, you know, the Burial of Kojo was something that we had just done. It's a one-off, you know. So you know, I want to be able to employ people longer, bring best practices in longer, bring equipment in longer, and to do that, you need an episodic show that is going to run for a few seasons. Which then means that it's continuous work for people and people can learn to grow. Because we've indeed built an amazing team. Mind you, 99% of people who made the Burial of Kojo were local Ghanaians. I brought one foreigner, who's my Mexican brother from the US, Michael Fernandez. He was my DOP, right? Everybody else was local. So from my producer to my script supervisor, so through and through, the Burial of Kojo is a Ghanaian film. It's not a film that, you know, there are other films that have come here, but they've brought the entire apparatus and they just set up here and they call it a Ghanaian film, but it's not. Our film was born right here with all the indigenous people who work hard to make it happen.
I want to talk to us a little bit about your Free at the Park. You're doing
Classics in the Park.
Classics in the Park.
Classics in the Park.
Yeah.
So Classics in the Park is an initiative of Africa Film Society, which is what I run in Ghana. So the idea of Africa Film Society was simple. We cannot make a film when there's no film culture. You're wasting your time. You end up showing your film everywhere else but at home, right? And that's what happens to a lot of really good work. It never gets shown in Africa. So when I came down, I realized that there just wasn't a film culture that wasn't the kind that, okay, we're just going to show up for the premiere at Silverbird, you know, and then nobody goes to watch the film after that. That's not film culture. So we realized that, okay, now we have to figure out a way to make it accessible to all. Because if you also know anything about Ghana, and you know that we're a very classist society. So the woman who's selling mangoes and oranges is not intersecting with, you know, the people who are, you know, living in, you know, these mansions, unless they're stopping to buy something by the street. So I realized that the reason why, you know, America, Europe, all these places function a certain way is because there's public programming. And public programming forces the Dadabi kids to sit with the Kankpe kids. It's just how it works. So my theory was, if we had a space that was public and free, then we can, you know, and also I remember that my first socialization of film was through free show, Cine. So they used to come, I grew up near a soccer park, and the evangelists would come and project their films and so on and so forth. So I knew that that was powerful as an idea. And it's also communal, right? So now you bring people from societies that may not intersect. You bring them together, and now they have to sit on a mat and watch a movie together. Now they have to be forced to dialogue, you know? So that was an amazing piece. We're on our 4th year. We've been doing classes in the park since 2016. We've shown everything from Ousmane Sembene to, I don't know, to Kwawansan. We've had Kwawansan and Antinima as they dialogue about a film they made 30-something years ago, which was extremely powerful because the two of them had probably not dialogued about that work in a long time. So it was reminiscent for them, but it was powerful for us, young people, who were not there when it was made. So they recounted the stories. We also had Nikwate Owu, who is a, you know, amazing filmmaker.
Yeah,
we showed You Hide Me and his film Ama, and he came in and spoke about, you know, what he went through to even make You Hide Me, sneaking into the British Museum archives, you know, deceiving them that he was going to do something else with the footage. He ended up cutting this expose about the theft, the grand theft of European museums and how they've kept all our artifacts, you know? So that space has been amazing, has been communal. It happens every last Saturday of the month. We start from August and end in December. So the next one's coming up.
So there's one coming up?
There's one coming up in September. I think it's September 28th, the last Saturday.
Okay.
So, I mean, please come out. It's amazing. Family, you know, people sit outdoors. It's a beautiful time. You know, my mother sells popcorn, which is, you know, it's amazing. She shows up for us. Yeah, it's a great time.
Wow, wow.
Yes, yes, yes.
And Blitz, what do you do to relax, man? When
Charlie,
well,
what is relax?
You just relax.
This is relaxing for me.
Yeah.
You know, doing the work and getting a chance
Yeah.
to really go around and dialogue about it, you know? Dialogue about it. I'm also a football fanatic like every Ghanaian in the world, you know? However, I mean, I don't follow these European leagues because they give me stress and headache. So, you know,
So who do you follow?
So I follow national teams and I follow our local league too, even though it's very, I mean, I also grew up on a time where when Kotoko and Hearts were playing, it was a big deal.
Yeah.
You know, I remember when, Charlie, I remember that era,
Yeah.
you know? I remember Olympics, I remember 11 Wise. I remember when it mattered. Charlie, and I mean the support, the fervor. You know, now we give all of that to Chelsea, we give all of that to Man U, people who don't care about you. But that's another story for another day.
Yeah.
We can't go in.
True.
Yeah, yeah.
Married with kids?
I'm not married, but with a kid.
Okay.
Yes, yes,
How
yes.
many?
One.
Okay.
He turned just 10 actually in August.
Oh,
so I have
okay.
a decade-year-old son.
Yeah.
Yes, and he comes down to Ghana often. You know, he's very very educated in the ways, and it's important for me, even though he lives between. But you know, he's definitely comes here often. Yes, yes, yes.
Are you teaching him Sisala?
Teaching him tree, which is,
Okay.
you know, I mean, Sisala is, I mean, if I could, I'll go there.
Yeah.
But Charlie, yeah, you know, if I'm going to empower him to be able to survive here, then tree is probably the most practical for now. But I mean, when he's with his grandparents, he learns a word or two, so that is necessary. Yeah.
And you're now living in Atlanta or Brooklyn or
So
both?
I move a lot. I'm heading to LA now. I'm directing some episodic shows out there, so I'm going to be there for a while. You know, but I mean, I've never been pinned down. They call it confusing your enemies. You know, they should never know where you rest.
They should know where you
Yeah. So for me, I'm always moving.
Yeah. One last question I want to ask before
Please.
you leave, because
Please.
it's good education for all of us.
Yes.
You know, because when you're shooting The Bird of Kojo, it got to a point where I think financing became an issue.
Yes,
So
huge
was
issue.
it crowdsourcing? Was
Yes, we did a Kickstarter, which was crowdfunding.
Crowdfunding.
Crowdfunding. And I mean, you know, that was probably one of the bravest things we did with this. We did a lot of brave things with this film. But the Kickstarter was the bravest. Because if you fail publicly. And that's done. And Kickstarter operates in a very interesting way. So if you set your target, you don't meet your target, no matter how much you raised, you lose it. So, I mean, we were stressed. And we put it at a high $75,000, you know? And
so it means when you set it at $75,000,
yes, even if you make 65, even if you make 70,000,
you lose it.
You lose it all.
Wow.
Yes. So you can imagine me, shout out to Amake Ababrese, who was my producer on this film, and Boat, Kuku Abim Boateng, who is my producer. You should have seen us. We were in here sweating. When you hit 70 and now you are praying that you get the last 75, we ended at 78,000.
Wow.
Just powerful.
Wow.
Powerful. Powerful. Mind you, for a film that, you know, had no stars, so-called stars, not even Ghanaian celebrity stars. We had no American stars. It was first-timers and people that nobody knew, right? But we were able to communicate it globally.
That's when your marketing came in, eh?
Charlie? In a major way. I mean, I tell people there is no way, because what the Borough of Kojo has done, a Ghanaian film has never done. Let's be clear. This is not to toot my horn, this is just to state fact. From New York Times Critics' Pick to Hollywood Reporter to being chosen top films of 2019 so far by dozens of major institutions, including Rotten Tomatoes. These are benchmarks that no Ghanaian and very few African films at that. And if they do, then remember how they work. They're almost always funded by foreign national institutions. So the Alliance Française, the Goethe Institute, the Dutch Film Funds, they all have their hands inside. Me? No. We own it. Lock, stock, barrel. Ghanaians. You know, if there's equity in the film, Ghanaians own it. You understand? And that for me was critical because we had to show, first of all, self-determination. That we can make brilliant work that can travel globally that we own. But now, because we own it, we can also chart the path. So, for instance, shout out to Ava DuVernay. I don't know if people are familiar with it, but Ava made Selma, the movie Selma. She also made the current Netflix show called When They See Us. She was the one who came to
When
us.
They See Us?
Yes, she's the director. Yeah. So she came and said, Blitz, this film is too good. Because at the time we were being rejected left and right by film festivals. So she said, look, I'm gonna take this film, I'll put it on my back. So she's the one who took it to Netflix. And Netflix said yes. So,
wow.
But here's the thing, even with Netflix saying yes, because I own the film, I told Netflix, I said, look, first of all, there's probably 2% of Ghanaians who have Netflix accounts. Most people are watching national television. So I'm not gonna give you my worldwide rights. Because if I give you my worldwide rights and I have no power, I have no ownership of my film for as long as you have it. So I only gave them US, UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. And I took the rest of the world. So now with the rest of the world, I've been able to license individually. So we're able to license to TV3. So we showed it in Ghana on a holiday for the masses. Because that's how I grew up. I grew up watching television, and that's how all my senses of cinema come into being. So if Netflix owned it, I could never do that. I also was able to license to airlines. So the Borough of Kojo right now is playing Emirates Airlines. It plays in Brussels Airlines, South African Airlines.
Show some love, man.
You understand?
Wow.
And so I say this to say that it's a long journey, and it requires extreme planning. You cannot just make a film, take it to Silverbed, and think you've done it. No. We have to sit back and ask ourselves, how can we be competitive in the long run? Which means, first of all, ownership, because if you own it, then you can start deciding. You sit here and decide how you want your chairs arranged. Nobody can come here and say, KSM, one chair in the middle. No, you say, this is me, you're in my house. And that's what we don't do often when our films do go out there. Because then it's also not just about the ownership of the work, it's the ownership of the path on how you're gonna communicate the work. Because I learned a long time ago a very significant quote. Your work is neither radical or revolutionary if those who can afford it don't have access to it. So if
Say that again, please.
your work is neither radical or revolutionary if those who cannot afford it don't have access to it. You understand? So yeah, I can make my film and show it to the few rich kids who can afford to go to Silverbed or who have Netflix accounts. Because even to have a Netflix account, think about what you need to have, right? You need to have a bank card. You have to have international contacts. Those things matter. But if you have a TV and you have paid your TV license, you're going to have TV3, which is ubiquitous. Everybody has it. So I've always known that if we're really going to make a change, which should be our national agenda and policy, making sure that our work is accessible should come number one. Everything else will figure itself out. I mean, we've made money on the film because naturally it would make money, but not at the expense of making it accessible for the people I made it for.
Put your hands together.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a clear pleasure.
And I've learned a lot, man.
Oh, man. Thank you. And it's such an honor. And I just need to say, and this is just tipping my hat off to you for having one of the longest, and not even one of the longest running show on television. That's powerful, brother. That is powerful. And the world should know that. Consistency and intention. Yes, man. Thank you. Thank you for the work.
Yes.
Yes.
Blitz.
Yes.
We'll be right back.
The KSM Show.